Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor. Thank you very much for joining us for these live broadcasts on the Car Dealer Magazine YouTube channel. Now, on the show today, we're going to be talking all things online as we have Paul Stokes and Paul Hilton from GForces. Hello, gentlemen.
Good morning, James. Good afternoon.
Hello. Hello, lovely to have you on. Lovely to have you on. Now, a bit of an intro. GForces is a leading e-commerce solutions provider. It's a name that's very familiar to car dealer readers and viewers. It's been around since 1999 and powers dealers' websites and offers a whole range of digital solutions for dealers. Now, Paul Stokes, he's head of e-commerce. He's been at GForces for 2 years, and in the past, he's been managing director of Rockcar as well. Now, the other Paul Hilton, has been at GForces for 11 years and is currently its sales director, and previously has had roles at Mannheim and Trader Media Group. Now, both are perfectly placed to talk about the online world, e-commerce, and all things digital. Now, this is a live show, so do feel free to pop a comment into the comments box, and I'll do my best to ask it to the pair of them. Now, we're going to be on the air for the next 20 to 30 or so minutes. I've got plenty to ask them, so let's get cracking. Now, gentlemen, thank you for coming on. Let's get straight into it then. Dealers have started to reopen in June, and by the end of the month, the whole country was open once again. Have you seen a lot of dealers interested in e-commerce since they reopened all those weeks ago?
Yeah, we have, James. Yeah, I mean, if we look at pre-lockdown levels, the appetite for e-commerce and for websites generally amongst dealers was there. You know, it's kind of happens at the beginning of every year. You know, a bit of a New Year's resolution, if you like, for dealers. You know, improving digital is a big objective, and then. Understandably, as we kind of went into March, you know, every business priorities were different. You know, things looking after their staff and looking after their customers and just trying to keep the lights on. So things did sort of slow down a little bit as you would expect to begin with. But it's really accelerated since then. I mean, we've seen a huge interest from dealers from the beginning of April, really. A lot of existing customers looking to enable the e-commerce functionality in the platform for their existing websites. And it's been fantastic. I mean, we've launched over 150 e-commerce websites for dealers since March this year. We've got about another 80 or so in projects at the moment for various different shapes and sizes, sort of small independent used car dealers, single franchise, right up to multi-franchise groups. So the appetite, yeah, certainly feels like it's accelerated since we've reopened.
Yeah. Do you think that our dealers have been aware that they've had to have some sort of e-commerce offering for years, really? I mean, you know, we've been telling, you've been telling, it's been a topic of much discussion. Do you think that lockdown has actually accelerated all of this? I mean, have people started to say, well, I've got to offer some form of online selling now? You know, now's the time to do it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you know, the interest was there before, but I think for a lot of dealers, there was a nervousness still in terms of embracing a full e-commerce solution. You know, online reservation buttons have been on websites for many, many years. And if we look at the particularly from a new business, you know, engaging with retailers that weren't existing customers, you know, a lot was still taking the stance of starting with a reserve online and potentially considering a full end-to-end e-commerce solution further down the line. But that's really changed since we started back up sort of end of May, start of June, in terms of, you know, speaking to new dealers. You know, on the whole, a lot of them have said, I've got to go for the full solution. I need to ready our business for a full e-commerce transformation. So, you know, I really think dealers have seen this opportunity, you know, that's come out of the last few months to make sure they're readying themselves for a full e-commerce solution. But it isn't just the dealers, as Paul will say, when we look at the other parties involved, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just adding to that, James, what we've certainly seen sort of post-lockdown is much more of an appetite from other suppliers within the industry that run systems, typically within a sales function, that want to talk to us about more detailed integration and more detailed collaboration. And if you take just a step back and just think about that for a second, that just makes 100% sense, in a sense that is all that's going to do is that's going to further improve the consumer experience on the front end of a website, but what it's also going to do, it's going to improve that operational process within the business as well, whether that be from an efficiencies point of view or perhaps even a cost saving perspective. So, we've had some great meetings certainly in the last couple of weeks with DMS providers, CRM providers, lenders even, that are willing to now talk to us about sort of direct integration and work in a very agnostic approach with us, which is great to hear.
Yeah, and it's that ecosystem that makes the whole thing work. We've got to have those strong relationships with the other industry partners and the other suppliers in the industry, and connecting those systems that drives the right efficiencies and the operational processes for dealers and benefits everybody. So,
brilliant. Okay, would you? I've totally clicked off my next question here, which is incredibly embarrassing. You think after months of doing this, I would have worked out how to do it, wouldn't you? Right, here we are, I found it. Now, what type of trends have you been seeing with dealer traffic? Because it's I would think there's probably been quite a few surprises, really.
Yeah, so I put some stats together actually for today. So, I mean, as you would expect, we see a lot of traffic to websites. I mean, we've got thousands of dealers that use our platform. So we see, hundreds of thousands of sessions to dealer websites a day. And as we kind of started at the beginning of the year, it wouldn't have been uncommon to expect 15 to 20 million sessions a month coming through to websites. And throughout the end of March and April, traffic was at a third of its daily rate. So we could see huge decline in website traffic, and universally across the board, pay-per-click traffic, social traffic, organic traffic, overall dealer website traffic was down significantly, but it's really picked back up. So if we look at July was a record month for dealer website traffic, and normally you'd expect seasonal variance. July generally is a little bit quieter as you get into the summer months, but it's up 50% year on year. And is actually 18% higher than January this year, which was the previous record month for the dealership website traffic. So it was interesting because I saw the article from Peter Waddell. James had interviewed Peter recently, and Peter suggested, if there was pent-up demand, he's not seeing that and expects it to continue. And I think we very much echo that. Certainly the data we're seeing suggests dealership website traffic is up significantly. It bounced back, obviously, in June, but it's maintained that level consistently through July. And that's really translating into inquiries. I mean, used car inquiries in July were 162% higher than April. New car inquiries were over 300% up July to April, and up year on year by over 30% as well. So, it certainly feels, and a lot of the dealers certainly echo that they all feel very busy at the moment. They're just hoping it's not going to tail off, but the data certainly doesn't suggest it's heading that way.
Yeah. What about test drives? There's been a big thing. Obviously, test drives was a huge issue during lockdown, whether people could offer them, insurance implications, whether people actually felt safe to offer them. The dealers who offered some kind of test drive booking facility on their website, presumably the number of test drive requests must have gone up during that period.
Well, it's funny. I looked at one major dealer group in July, had 0 used car test drive requests. They had more virtual test drive requests than physical used car. New cars slightly different. I think people still want to arrange a test drive on a new car, but used car test drives have tailed off significantly. The finance offers I'm certainly seeing from a lot of the OEMs for new cars. Very appealing rates are offered there for finance. So I can see the interest there on new, but dealers are adapting their websites. They're taking out physical test drive request buttons in favor of virtual test drive request buttons because the demand isn't there for the test drive requests. That's, I was looking just at the data, and it had gone from 50, 60 test drive requests a month to none, May, June and July. So it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah, very surprising. Let's stay on the topic of used cars, Paul. So in terms of organic traffic, I mean, has there been a spike in all of this? I mean, and also about social media. I mean, because social media obviously played a huge part during lockdown, because that, for many dealers, that was one of the only ways that they could actually communicate with their customers, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, organic traffic has bounced back exceptionally well. So if you think, for a lot of dealerships that would have been running some pay-per-click advertising, they would have got referral traffic from third-party sources, as well as things like social media. Social media traffic has remained fairly consistent right the way through lockdown. You know, so in actual fact, it's kind of bucked the trend of overall traffic declining, but social traffic staying at a consistent level. But social media traffic to dealer websites is generally very, very low anyway, because if you're in Facebook or in Instagram, you generally stay in Facebook or Instagram. You just sort of engage in the content that's there. But organic traffic has seen a huge increase since coming back. So those dealers that have had particularly strong organic presence, good, well-optimized websites, we could have a whole separate Car Dealer Live on the merits of SEO, so we won't get into that today. But the organic traffic has certainly bounced back, and I think that's probably been more down to dealers being a little bit slower to restart things like their pay-per-click advertising, or being a little bit more budget conscious in putting extra money behind paid ads. So whilst they've been a little bit slow to bring that back up, whilst the demand's been there, you know, it's been a real sort of shot in the arm for those that have got strong organic sites, because they've been benefiting from the traffic from that. Yeah. And it's mobile that we've really seen the biggest growth. I mean, it's huge mobile traffic to dealer websites.
I was going to ask about that, because of course mobile has been a huge thing over the last decade or so, hasn't it? But I was just wondering whether that still continued during lockdown. You know, more people are sat at home. They may not actually be looking at stuff on their phone. They may be looking at stuff on a desktop, for example.
Well, we saw a little bit. So, I mean, if you look at July and as an overall month, it's about 66%, 67% of traffic is on mobile handsets. And then you've got about 7% of all website traffic on tablet, and the balance, 26%, so is on desktop. In April and May, it creeped up to 29% desktop traffic. So it bounced a little bit as more of us were at home working, people more on their laptops, but it's changed. It's flipped right back. So, you know, if I looked at August month to date, and it was down at 24-25%. So it's on the decline. I mean, we anticipate desktop traffic to be below 20% by the end of next year. And I know James had written about the 150th edition of Car Dealer, and the website traffic being at 90%. I mean, it's not quite there for car dealer websites, but it's certainly heading in that direction. And again, that kind of plays more into what we were talking about around new and used car advertising, and just the right buttons on dealer websites to get those interactions on mobile. You've got less real estate to deal with. You know, if you've got a big test drive button on your used car website and nobody wants to test drive a car, then you're missing an opportunity, because you know, you've only got a small window to get those users interested. So
yeah, I mean, we've been saying for years, you know, you've got to have, you know, at the very least, a mobile optimized website. You know, if what you're saying, if your predictions are true about next year, about 20% of desktop views, I mean, people have really got to embrace this sooner rather than later, haven't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all too often we all talk about we all look at the bigger designs of websites on desktop, and we look at what a site looks like on the big screen in the meeting room or on a demo, but you've got to bring it right back to what's actually happening in that mobile handset, because it will be, by the end of this year, it'll be 70% at least of all website traffic on mobile devices. Majority of that is obviously iPhone and Android. So again, those devices work slightly differently. The way they interact, the way they load, the way forms work. You know, there's lots of different things dealers look at, but they've got to take that time to look at their own websites on their mobiles and see what that looks like, and how that device works.
Yeah.
And actually, James, interestingly, just on mobile, just to add to that, we're seeing that follow through in terms of the transactions that we're seeing go through the platform from an online perspective as well. In fact, 53% of all of our transactions that get undertaken, whether that be a reservation or full finance application, are actually done on mobile. No surprise, really. You know, that's in line with the figures that Paul's just presented in terms of sort of browsing. But one of the things that's actually quite interesting as well, we talk about mobile optimization. We're always looking at ways in which we can improve that mobile experience. We introduced, and we're the first supplier to introduce Apple Pay a couple of months ago, where now a customer can just really easily and quite seamlessly just, use their mobile device, through facial recognition to do an Apple Pay transaction. And we've seen over 10 million transactions in terms of monetary value in the last couple of months that have now been processed through Apple Pay. So it just goes to show that you put the ease and simplicity at the customer's fingertips and they will interact with it quite simply.
I think there was one, was it a €21,000 car bought online with a mobile, like cash purchase, an outright purchase using mobile phone. Can you imagine using your face to buy a €21,000 car?
Well, I'd just like to have £21,000 actually. But I suppose all of this is it's finally, you're offering the tools for dealers to actually really get into the heart of how people are transacting at the moment, because people have been transacting on things like Amazon for years, but at the moment, especially during lockdown, that was, for many people, that was the only way that they could actually get a new book. Sometimes they're shopping and all, and by bringing dealers into that fold as well, you're just getting dealers into the position where that's how people buy stuff these days, isn't it? And Apple Pay and Google Pay, it's an increasing trend, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think what it's done and what the other industries have done is they've conditioned consumers to be more comfortable online, and we're absolutely seeing that through our transaction growth. And we've seen phenomenal amounts of increases month on month. Not just in the period up to lockdown, but actually during lockdown and post lockdown. And actually, quite interestingly, we saw first month that showrooms were open in June, we posted more transactions online than we did in May. If we look at 2 months in isolation, in terms of looking at March and April combined, June did more than those 2 months combined together. So there's a real appetite out there in the marketplace. And it is very much, as you said, James, it's about offering the consumer that choice and that transparency and that ease with which they can transact if they want to through that website platform.
And the more you see those buttons on websites, the more familiar you feel as a consumer to use them. I mean, if you go back 5 years, you would never have seen a buy now button on a car dealer website, generally speaking. If you look at it now, most are either have it or will be planning to put it on, I'm sure, in some format. But so the more consumers get used to seeing those call to actions and the confidence they have to do that, native checkout being one, not leaving the website, secure hosting and so on, the more comfortable anyone would be to purchase. I mean, if you can buy a £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 holiday or home electrical goods online, then why not a car? Right? So,
yeah. Now, all of this obviously is trackable. I mean, when are people buying cars online? What times of the day are they likely to be doing this?
Well, it's good. We get the notifications, so I'm thankful for Outlook rules that let me file it away into a folder, because they come through at all hours of the day and night. I mean, it's interesting. They tail off in the UK. Paul will talk a bit more about the specific, but they tail off in the UK sort of around midnight, and then definitely pick back up again at 7 a.m. But now that we've got dealers in Europe and Middle East, and recently we've launched a few in Australia, I mean, we're seeing them coming through sort of 24 hours a day in terms of overall transactions. But Paul, you'll have some of the specifics in terms of...
I mean, certainly in terms of the UK, I mean, the simple answer, James, is when are people transacting? They're transacting every day, 24/7. And when we do the analysis of that, and when we actually look at when those transactions are taking place, weekends, for example, are not the busiest times for a customer to buy a car online. Sundays is actually the lowest percentage day that you will see in a given 7-day week. Monday actually is the highest. Monday accounts for about 16% of the transactions that take place on a 7-day rolling average. And we've seen that trend pretty much constant over all of the year. For example, in April and May, which is quite interesting, during lockdown, we saw transactions actually at 68% during that period, 9 till 5. But then actually out of lockdown, that's now reduced back down to 42%. So there's a lot of changes that take place, I think, probably around individual circumstance and what drives that. But simply customers are buying cars every single day, every hour of the day, you know, and we're getting to see that, and we're building, obviously, you know, quite a nice set of business insights as a result of that.
I mean, does that change the way a dealer operates, or is it makes no effect whatsoever?
I think in terms of, perhaps not necessarily in terms of how they actually operate, but I think what it does do, it probably gives them that nice to have feeling first thing of the morning that, you know, whilst they've been closed, typically a sales function closes at 7 p.m, they might have had 4 or 5 transactions that have dropped in then, you know, before that 9 o'clock bell starts, as it were, for the day to start. So, you know, they're always open. It's like always, you know, the lights are always on when you've got that transactional functionality within your website. In terms of how they will deal with that customer, they'll deal with that customer and that order probably exactly the same way as they would do a face-to-face or a telephone showroom interaction. You know, there probably is no difference in that sort of respect.
Yeah.
Is all, you know, what e-commerce is doing, quite simply, is it's putting the control in the customer's hands, you know, to enable them to transact time and convenience for them. So.
What kind of cars are people actually buying? Because I think there's probably a perception that it's only the cheaper cars that people are buying online. You're probably going to prove me wrong there, aren't you? So, I mean, what kind of cars are people actually buying?
I mean, it is anything and everything. You would have thought, like you, it would have been the cheaper cars, but we've had, I mean, a Lamborghini Huracan ordered online a couple of weeks ago. Mercedes G-Wagons, good few of them have been purchased online at over 100,000. So, you know, it's anything and everything. And I think the more, you know, we've got a lot more dealers that are coming on board, different types of dealers. We've got van dealers, car dealers, motorcycle dealers, and then we've got premium, you know, premium brands and volume brands, and then smaller independents. So there's a real mix, and with that comes a change in the profile. But again, Paul will know the average order values and so on.
Yeah, so I mean, if we look at the average transaction value, and I've taken this over the last 6 months, so we're seeing an average transaction order online of £15,300. So I mean, I guess in answer to your question, James, they're not cheap cars. You know, that they're probably in the norm, as it were, as far as a used car is concerned. We're seeing an average transaction age of 2 years old. So again, you know, typically cars that perhaps are still within balance of manufacturer warranties that are being sold. And one thing for sure we are absolutely seeing is that when you look at premium stock and premium used cars, and you look at the brands of like Audi and BMW and Mercedes, those three sit within our top 6 of brands that sell on a monthly basis in terms of, you know, the volume of percentage of brands and transactions that are going through. So I think what it's telling us without question is that, yeah, it comes back to that appetite, perhaps that desire. It just takes away that face-to-face transactional element of, you know, of buying a car. But what we're definitely seeing, and we get feedback from our clients on this, is that when they speak to a customer about the process of buying online, they've all pretty much said around about the same sort of thing. You gave us the ease with which to do it. You made us feel comfortable in terms of things like data and data privacy. And with our technology, the way we're able to do that is we keep the customer, in a sense, what we call baked within our native platform. We don't take the customer off to separate third-party plugins. And I think all that does at the end of the day, it just continually builds that trust with the consumer, and it builds that trust with the dealer brand. And that's really important when you look at any e-commerce statistics, and when you look at any e-commerce best practices. It is about, you know, engaging with that customer in a way that, yes, they do get what you're offering them in terms of service, but you make it easy for them to do that as well.
Yeah. I mean, listening to all of this, I mean, you do sort of wonder whether people actually ever want to go back to a showroom. I mean, are you seeing this kind of trend or not?
In the dealership visits, a request to get into dealerships through non-e-commerce inquiries are still on the up. You know, so whilst we see overall e-commerce transactions on the increase, so too are general inquiries and you know, trade in part exchange requests. As we talked about, test drive requests on used cars have pretty much dropped off massively. But on new cars, they remain pretty consistent. So I think people do want to visit showrooms, but as with all retail, it's, you know, we're not generally off out just browsing around the shops like we used to be before on the whole, I think, you know. So I don't think people would want, I mean, I think if you go back a couple of years, the the Google studies that were doing the rounds for 1.2 showroom visits per vehicle purchase. I mean, it's got to be lower than that. It can't be much lower, obviously. You've got to go at some point to visit the showroom. But it is on the decline in terms of a first call to action to go and arrange to go and see a vehicle or go and meet the dealership.
And actually, James, from a transactional perspective as well, what we're absolutely seeing is the demand for a collection service still. So once they've done the transaction and browsed and they've made the decision to buy online, we're seeing about 98% of our transactions where they then want to physically go to the dealer, probably meet an individual and then have that handover experience. So at the moment, certainly through the retailers that we've got live on the platform, very, very little demand for home delivery. And I think if we strip that back a little bit as well, whilst home delivery is being offered on their websites through that checkout process, there probably is still a degree of nervousness within the industry about home delivery and all that comes with that as far as distance selling regulations and cooling off periods and that type of thing. So I think when we hear people talk about the bricks to clicks model, it's still very, very evident that customers do want to go and have that physical interaction. It's just probably the transactional piece that they like to feel as if, no, I want to be in control of this. I don't need to be sold a car. I've found the specific car that I want to buy. I've done all my research, and now you're giving me functionality to enable me to do that. Yeah. It's then the dealer visit then in a sense becomes the moment of truth where you then go to effectively to collect.
I think you'll see that with the online only, retailers, particularly with Cazoo's acquisition of Imperial. I think it shows that requirement to have a physical pickup location and for a consumer to physically go somewhere to collect that vehicle is hugely important. Right? And that's what all dealers have the opportunity to offer without that nervousness of a complete distant remote sale and potentially a car coming back after 14 days with 2,000 miles on and 4 bold tyres, which is generally the fear, I think, for a lot of dealers, isn't it?
Yeah. It's about different customer tastes, isn't it? Because there are many customers out there who are perfectly happy ordering online, getting their cars delivered to their home. But I suppose there is a danger that we're just tarring everybody with the same brush. That this is a runaway train. That this is the future we're heading towards. But there are still, for lots of people, a car is still an incredibly important purchase. They've gone through a lot of decisions to get to that point of actually buying the car and actually picking up the car, having the whole reveal of the car under the cloth.
Yeah, of course.
It's a very traditional view, but it's still a view that is still very current at the moment.
It's all about choice. It's all we've always said that as a business. It's about giving the consumer the choice whether they want to have the full online transaction, click and collect, or just a good old traditional sales process of send an inquiry and go in and fist bump or elbow shake or whatever the method the dealers are using. I saw a post on Facebook group about foot shakes and elbow bumps, and somebody joking that they fist bumped an 80-year-old for the first ever time. But whatever consumers want to do, but whatever they want to do, it's about the choice, giving them the choice of how they want to transact with that dealer, and that's what software like ours enables dealers to do.
Yeah. So, what kind of effect is this having actually in the showroom in terms of the makeup of the sales staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say there's an awful lot of consideration going, and it won't be just across our clients in terms of what does now feel right in terms of infrastructure, what feels right now in terms of being able to manage effectively the increase in digital inquiries, which we're certainly definitely starting to see. We unfortunately are seeing redundancies across the industry, where dealers are taking the opportunity to probably take a real hard look at their cost base. And I think that's going to go on, James. To be honest, I think that's just the nature of running a business. That's the nature of, at the end of the day, having to make all the nuts and bolts fit together to make sure that it can generate that sensible return on investment. We're seeing without question a viewpoint in terms of more centralisation of digital resource. So typically not necessarily whereby the customer then would get channeled and funneled into perhaps a a sales executive, it goes to a centralized team whereby the lead in a sense becomes more digitally qualified, and then it's then passed on to a sales exec or a sales advisor as perhaps more of a pre-qualified lead. So we're seeing an awful lot of that work go on in place across our dealer body, and I think that will continue. That's just probably been accelerated by the pandemic, and accelerated by the fact that inquiry levels have changed, but customers do want to interact in a slightly different way as well. So,
finally, post COVID-19, and hopefully we continue to be post, and we don't actually go back into a second lockdown. Do you think that there is now more of a consideration in having an omni-channel e-commerce strategy now? Is now the time?
In short, James, the simple answer to that is without question. And I think it's probably fair to say that, no one could foresee this pandemic coming towards us. It caught dealers out, quite simply. Lights were literally turned off in and across businesses in the UK. That's had a massive impact, in terms of how those dealers now operate, and certainly from a profitability perspective as well. We're seeing month on month increased demand, as Paul has already said, in terms of not just adoption of the platform, but people wanting to adopt and taking perhaps that thought process of e-commerce a little bit further than perhaps they had done in the past. And that for me is about that's about contingency, and that's almost around disaster planning as well, and disaster recovery planning, in a sense that, look, hopefully, as you say, we don't get that second wave, but what if we do? You want to still be able to keep the lights on. And being able to keep the lights on means you've got to transact in a slightly different way, and online actually gives that. So, short answer is yes. There's a lot of thought process and strategic thinking going on across the dealer networks as to how they plan for this going forward.
I mean, I think regional lockdowns, we've seen a few of them already, and I think that's going to be we're going to see more of that, unfortunately, if required, to lock down certain areas and to put some restrictions. And consumers still want to buy locally on the whole when it comes to vehicle purchases. So dealers need to be able to adapt, because it may be that in certain locations they're not able to physically open the dealerships, and they need to offer those digital channels. So it has to be part of a part of your overall sort of future retailing strategy, as Paul said. So
yeah, brilliant. Well, if any dealer out there is wondering what steps they need to put in place if there is a second national lockdown, we have got a feature article on the website at the moment. GForce have contributed to that as well, so it's really good reading. Not alarmist at all, but if people are interested, the steps they need to take to get ready for a second lockdown, then do head over to the website. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was absolutely fascinating. Some fantastic stats there. Really very good indeed. If anybody watching this wants to do a Car Dealer Live and come on the show and have a nice little chat like we've just had, then please do email me, james.batchelor@blackballmedia.co.uk, or James Baggett himself, james@blackballmedia.co.uk. On our next show on Wednesday, we're running one of our special legal shows with logistics. That's one not to be missed. And until then, thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.